visual touch, the visceral absence of touch, the impulsive touch. I touch things I shouldn't. There's always that second of a thrill. I got away with it. It's a test of reality. It's a rebellion against absence. It's proof that the world pushes back when I reach toward it. Over time, that impulse became a method. An impulse turned into practice. If I'm honest, most of the time, the material matters less, the surface matters less than the act of touching itself, that I can reach and the world still answers back. The American sociologist Richard Sennett writes that every good craftsman sustains a dialogue between concrete practices and thinking. That's where I like to be, crafting. I am a verb. Only for this craft, at this time, for this project, my material is contact itself. The British anthropologist Tim Ingold once said that to make is to join with materials in their flow. This is my flow. Slow, repetitive, steady. Enough to let the smallest variations reveal themselves. Hands are my medium and my subject. My hand records. My hands engage. My hand thinks. My hands create. Each clip is a dot of ink in a sporadic diary of gestures, a record of moments that would otherwise slip through the gaps of memory. When I look back through the archive, I can see time accumulating. My nails change length, my skin shifts with seasons. I see clothes come and gone, places that no longer exist. And yet the framing stays the same. Constancy becomes a way of measuring life and time. Time that is generated through presence. The Kenyan philosopher John S. Mbiti describes time not as an abstract nor an infinite horizon, but as a composition of lived events. Time unfolds to experience itself through the rhythm of events. Presence generates duration. Each gesture, each touch extends existence just that little bit further into being. The forbidden touch. The rule is everywhere. Do not touch. Museums act as if sight were detached, as if appreciation required distance. They taught me that art is sacred, fragile, valuable precisely because it is untouchable. The closer I get, the more dangerous I become. The phrase, "do not touch," is a cultural artifact, a cultural technique which transforms a reflex into an ethical dilemma. Obedience becomes respect, curiosity becomes threat. But that prohibition reveals its own fear. If touch were meaningless, we wouldn't need to control it. Touch has agency. Touch changes things. Sometimes the object, sometimes the subject. The German philosopher Walter Benjamin calls the aura of the artwork the unique appearance of a distance, however close the object may be. Museums stage that aura through control, beyond the velvet rope, implicitly invisible as metaphysics. And sometimes, often, I reach through that rope, not beyond it, through, not above it, through. Not carelessly, but to see what happens when reverence becomes reciprocity. Touching art is my way of meeting the work halfway. The US-American historian Carol Duncan wrote that museums function like rituals. They choreograph behavior, instruct the body how to act, who may approach, and who must watch. Touching breaks that ritual. It replaces choreography with conversation. So, are replicas the solution? The British cultural historian Tony Bennett noted that accessibility can reproduce hierarchy if it only permits participation under supervision. Authenticity, then, isn't a property of the object, but a relation between bodies. The Nara document on authenticity said it long ago. Authenticity changes with context, with culture, with the mode of engagement. So the question isn't whether the artwork is real, but whether the encounter is real. The caring touch. I'm not naive about conservation. If everyone touched art the way I do, we'd have no art left. That's why my touches are light, deliberate, almost reverent. Care and disobedience don't cancel each other out. Sometimes care requires disobedience. Lydia Clark, Helio Otisika, Anne Hamilton, every artist who has worked with participation of touch has known that contact always carries consequences. After filming, I disinfect my hands. That ritual is part of the thought, a recognition that intimacy leaves traces, sometimes on the object, sometimes on the subject, but always on time. The textural touch. Why do we find looking at touch so satisfying? Maybe because our screens have made the world too smooth. Our hands crave friction. The French philosopher Maurice Merleau-Ponty wrote that the eye is already a hand. Perception, he said, is never passive. It gropes, it reaches, it anticipates resistance. When I film texture, when I film surface, when I film material, I'm offering the eye something to hold on to, something to grasp. The US-American art theorist Laura U. Marx calls it haptic visuality, a kind of looking that is closer to touching than to seeing. The image becomes skin. The US-American cultural critic Vivian Sobchak extends the thought. The film has a body that senses and can be sensed. When I film my own hand, I'm doubling that exchange. The camera becomes an organ of touch. It extends me. The French philosopher Gilles Deleuze, writing about painting, contrasted the optical with the haptic. The haptic, he said, collapses figure and ground. It pulls the viewer into proximity. That's what I'm after, a visual field so close it starts to breathe. The camera, the screen, the editing timeline, each is a cultural technique of mediation, a surface where the body meets code. The Canadian philosopher Marshall McLuhan said, "Every medium is an extension of our senses." Mine happens to extend the fingertips. The dangerous touch. Since COVID, touch has become moralized. Clean versus dirty, safe versus risky, care versus contamination. Public touch feels perilous, and yet I still touch everything, but only when I film. Lead paint, rust, dust, surfaces that leave residue on the skin. I know the hazards and I choose them. The German sociologist Ulrich Beck called our world a risk society, one that tries to manage uncertainty by eliminating contact. But contact is how we learn the world. I refuse compulsory touch, the random press of the crowd, the mass-touched surfaces of ignored life. But I do choose specific, accountable contact. The British anthropologist Mary Douglas defined dirt as a matter out of place. Touching for the forbidden is my way of replacing matter where it belongs, in relation. Each act is a controlled transgression, an experiment. The French philosopher Jean-Luc Nancy calls it exposure. Touch, he says, is never mastery. It is the moment when the self is opened to the other. That's the risk I'm willing to take. The serial touch. Repetition is often seen as failure, but in practice, it's how we learn. Scientific method works the same way. Keep one variable constant and notice what changes. By keeping the gesture identical, I can read the world through variation. Each clip becomes a data point in an embodied study. The smallest differences, light, pressure, color, texture, becomes significant. The Danish social critic Søren R. Kierkegaard wrote a whole book called Repetition to ask whether anything can ever truly repeat. The ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus is famously quoted to have said that the river is never the same one steps into twice. Maybe I'm the river that reality steps into. The British anthropologist Tim Ingold says that lines like paths, that lines like threads, that lines like gestures are ways of thinking. My hand tracing surface is that line made visible. Repetition makes time perceptible. It's a strategy of comprehension, a way to make chaos legible. In a culture of smooth infinity, haptic events become resistance. The repetition itself becomes the art's pulse. The repetition itself becomes its breathing. The unfelt touch. Touch is the oldest sense, and perhaps the one most at risk. Screens promise connection while insulating us from contact. Fingers glide across glass, but never meet content. The screen is surface, the screen is barrier, the screen is the only material. My recordings live in that contradiction, the proof of contact for an audience that will never feel what the recording is showing, including me once the file is saved. The German cultural critic Walter Benjamin called this the loss of aura through reproduction. But perhaps a new aura appears here, the aura of mediation itself. Each video is a fossil of sensation. I keep making new ones to exchange one lost immediacy for another. The US-American computer theorist J. David Bolter and American new media scholar Richard Gruson describe this process as remediation, the endless cycle where new media recreate the affect of presence by acknowledging absence. That's exactly where I live with this project, inside the gap between contact and representation. The moving image insists on presence while confirming absence. Technology doesn't dematerialize experience. It rematerializes elsewhere, in code, in interface, in gesture. Touch migrates. The attentive touch. The world is noisy, visually, mentally, sensorially. Everything demands attention and then sells it back to us. Creating this series is my way of carving space in that noise. The work is about the discipline of attention itself, the same frame, the same movement, the same idea, a metronome of focus. The French philosopher Simone Weil wrote that attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Every repetition is a small act of generosity toward the details of the world, toward details of life, toward time. In an economy built on distraction, consistency becomes radical. Repetition produces calm, a minimalist survival tactic. There's a quiet pleasure in doing something that no algorithm can optimize. To me, even in its quietness, the act of touching, the act of recording, the act of attention is political. The reason to touch. So why do I keep doing this? Because every touch reminds me that perception is not passive. It is participatory. To touch is to acknowledge presence. Mine too, because when I touch, I'm also being touched. Between skin and surface, between attention and time, being in the world is always a matter of contact, even when that contact is mediated or forbidden. Phenomenology calls perception a practice, a doing, not a receiving. Art does the same thing. It tests where I end and the world begins. Is that what art does? Draw that boundary again and again until it starts to blur? The French philosopher Jean-Luc Nancy writes that to touch is to be exposed. Exposure is both danger and recognition. This is the space where visual touch exists. Visual touch is a phenomenology of proximity, a study of how contact, real or imagined, remains the most convincing proof of reality. To see touch is to feel the distance between perception and its image, and to realize that this distance is where meaning lives. Touch is knowledge. Touch is resistance. Touch is remembrance. To touch is to exist. In the end, visual touch is about presence, the gentle reverence of attention to the events of time, to reach out and know that the world answers back. Thank you.